On the day of her wedding, Sabrina Ellis was publicly humiliated, her fiancé choosing her sister instead. But what no one knew was that Sabrina smiled for the cameras, whispered to his father, "The empire belongs to me now," and walked away. 3 months later she owned everything they'd built, and she was just getting started. The first time I met Nathan Carter I was 7 years old and already fluent in 2 languages. He was barefoot on the back lawn of the Vineyard estate, wearing a Spider-Man t-shirt and holding a juice pouch like it was a wine glass. "You're too serious for someone wearing jelly sandals," he said, squinting against the sun. I didn't answer. I just turned away and pulled out the paperback novel tucked under my arm, The Secret Garden. I'd always preferred the company of girls who didn't exist. He sat beside me anyway. "Do you know how to climb trees?" That was the beginning. By the time I was 10 I knew what EBITDA was. By 14 I was shadowing board meetings at Ellis Global, seated beside my father as he discussed international expansion and capital restructuring. By 16 I'd negotiated my own summer internship with a private equity firm, not because I needed experience but because I couldn't stand wasting time. My life was designed, measured, efficient. Nathan's wasn't. He was the only son of Charles Carter, founder of Carter & Company, one of the most respected industrial firms in the country. The Carters were old money with new ambition. But Nathan? He painted, played the piano, audited poetry classes at Brown. His laugh came easily and he flirted with recklessness the way I flirted with precision. We saw each other every summer. Every family gala. Every holiday charity ball where our names printed together on the donor list felt like foreshadowing. When we ended up at Yale, me for a dual JD/MBA, him for a liberal arts degree he never finished, it felt inevitable. He kissed me on the roof of Sterling Library the night I turned 22. "I don't know what this is," he murmured, fingers brushing my cheek like I was made of glass, "but I think it's been happening for a long time." It had. Our engagement came 3 years later, announced not with fanfare but with a handshake between our fathers over a billion-dollar merger. The Ellis Carter Holdings partnership would shift 2 legacies into one consolidated future. My mother wept when Nathan proposed with a 3-carat sapphire flanked by diamonds. Not because of the ring. Because of the paperwork that followed. "Are you happy?" she asked that night, brushing my hair as if I were still 10. "I'm ready," I replied. That wasn't the question she asked. But it was the only answer I could give. We set the date for April 9th, 6 months out. That gave just enough time to construct the perfect event without losing the emotional momentum. Miranda, my executive assistant turned bridal coordinator, created a task force. Guest lists, catering tastings, architectural floral sketches. All spreadsheet to within an inch of their lives. "Are you planning a wedding or launching an IPO?" Nathan teased one evening, watching me organize ceremony seating in a color-coded system that accounted for interfamily tension, corporate alignment and rumored affairs. I looked up from the chart. "Both." He laughed, leaned across the table and kissed the corner of my mouth. "I'm glad it's you," he said. "Even if this whole thing feels like a press conference in disguise." I wanted to believe him. The wedding would be held at the Ashby Hotel, a gilded Manhattan landmark reserved only for the kind of people whose names didn't need introductions. I had chosen it not just for its grandeur but because it was where my parents had once renewed their vows. Before the betrayal, before my mother learned what a second family in Geneva looked like. The ballroom would hold 400 guests. Chandeliers of Austrian crystal would glisten above tables dressed in ivory and gold. Each seat would bear a personalized, hand-pressed vellum card. My dress, a collaboration between 2 couture houses, was currently under 24-hour surveillance in a showroom on Madison. I was leaving nothing to chance. "You're working too hard," Nathan said one night, rubbing my shoulders as I stared at my laptop. He had shown up unexpectedly, bringing takeout from a little place we loved in Tribeca. I tilted my head back. "Working is how I breathe. Breathing is how most people breathe." I cracked a smile, barely. "Then most people should learn better habits." He leaned forward, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You don't have to be perfect all the time." "Yes," I said, closing the laptop. "I do." My sister Vanessa arrived home 2 weeks before the wedding. She'd been finishing a design residency in Milan. Something artsy, something vaguely competitive. Vanessa had always lived in my shadow, yet she never resented it. Or if she did, she never showed it. Tell me you at least made room for champagne at this thing, she said, peering at my 6-tab wedding binder. She wore a silk blouse the color of old money and smelled like imported citrus and freedom. There's a Dom Perignon tasting scheduled for Thursday, I said. You're on the pairing committee. She mock saluted. Finally, something I'm qualified for. We were close. Not confessional close, but the kind of close born from protecting each other in a house that loved reputation more than truth. She'd been the only one who knew when I found out about our father's mistress. The only one who held me when I broke down in our laundry room at 15, too proud to cry in my own room. You okay? She asked now more seriously. I'm marrying someone I've known my whole life, I said. Our companies are merging. Our families are aligned. What could go wrong? Vanessa stared at me for a long moment. That's not an answer. 2 nights before the ceremony, we held the final rehearsal dinner at the Carter townhouse. An elegant 6-story brownstone lined with ancestral oil paintings and 3 generations of regret. Nathan looked beautiful under the chandelier light. His smile was effortless. He held my hand too long. Kissed my temple as he introduced me to foreign investors as my soon-to-be better half. Charles Carter stood at the far end of the room, swirling his drink, watching everything. He looked at me like a man inspecting a rare painting, trying to decide if it was a masterpiece or a forgery. I've underestimated you, he said when we finally spoke. That would make you like everyone else, I replied. His lips curled faintly upward. Let's not pretend this is about love, Sabrina. It never has been. I don't pretend, I said, calm as still water. And I don't need it to be. He raised his glass in a mock toast. To ruthless daughters. And underqualified sons, I replied, clinking his glass with mine. The night before the wedding I didn't sleep. I stood in front of the massive windows of my suite in the Ashby Tower, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The city pulsed quietly, unaware that everything I'd spent my life preparing for was less than 24 hours away. I reached for the ring on my finger, the sapphire Nathan had given me. It was cold. Not from the metal. From memory. I told myself I loved him. That we were building something timeless. That this wasn't just business. But somewhere deep in the part of me I never let speak out loud, I knew better. I didn't want almost love. I wanted something real. Even if I didn't believe I deserved it. The morning of the wedding arrived like a painting. Sharp, blue, flawless. I dressed alone. No bridesmaids. No flashbulbs. Just me, the dress, and the silence. Miranda waited outside the suite, clipboard in hand. Everyone's in position. I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back was elegance incarnate. Sharp lines, calm eyes, lips painted in a shade named Red Ambition. I didn't smile. But I nodded. I'm ready. The Ashby Grand Ballroom had never looked more magnificent. 400 of New York's most powerful people sat in perfectly aligned rows, dressed in black tie splendor beneath a ceiling of hand-blown Murano chandeliers. Ivory orchids rained down from suspended glass spheres. A string quartet played the opening chords of Clair de Lune as I began walking down the aisle. I was not nervous. I was not hopeful. I was ready. Everything had been leading to this moment. A lifetime of responsibility, of quiet control, of making myself into a woman no one could touch. Today I was becoming a Carter in name and the true ruler of Ellis Carter Holdings in fact. The contract was signed. The board seats restructured. The joint holdings in Asia and Dubai aligned. All that remained was the ceremony. Nathan stood at the altar in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, lips parted slightly, eyes fixed on mine. His hair had been styled the way I liked it, parted to the side, just messy enough to look human. For a second he looked like the boy on the lawn with a juice box. The one who had asked me to climb trees. But that boy had grown up. And so had I. The music softened. The minister smiled. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. I barely heard the rest. My mind was calculating. Guests, alliances, media coverage. I spotted Charles Carter seated in the front row, his expression unreadable. My father beside him, expression tight but proud. Vanessa, in a muted blue silk gown, sat in the third row, her eyes locked on Nathan. Her hands were folded gently in her lap. The minister turned toward Nathan. Nathaniel James Carter, do you take Sabrina Catherine Ellis to be your lawfully wedded wife? The ballroom held its collective breath. Nathan's jaw tightened. A muscle twitched near his temple. My stomach dipped. Then his eyes, those hazel eyes I had memorized across hundreds of evenings, shifted. Away from me. Past me. Toward something, someone, in the crowd. I didn't turn immediately. I didn't have to. I felt it. Like gravity pulling toward a different center. Slowly I followed his gaze. To Vanessa. Her hands were no longer folded in her lap. They were resting over her stomach. Protectively. The movement was small but unmistakable. A gesture that didn't belong at a wedding. A gesture that belonged in a doctor's office. In an announcement. Not here. Not now. Not with my fiancé. I turned back to Nathan. His lips parted. He started, voice barely above a whisper. I can't do this. There was a beat of silence. A vacuum. And then noise, gasps, rustling, confused murmurs. I'm sorry, Sabrina, Nathan said, stepping back, hands up as if surrendering. Behind me, the quartet trailed off in confusion. Somewhere near the back, a camera clicked. My mother's intake of breath sounded like a scream in the silence. I looked at Nathan for a long moment. He flinched as if expecting a slap or a collapse. His eyes were wide. Guilty. I simply nodded. I understand, I said clearly, loudly to the room. Then I slipped the engagement ring from my finger. A 3-carat sapphire set in platinum. I placed it gently in the minister's Bible. Gasps rippled through the ballroom like wind through a field. I turned and walked down the aisle. Alone. As I passed the front row, I paused beside Charles Carter. He stood just slightly as if to intercept me, but I leaned close to his ear and whispered, Clause 14.c. You should have read it more carefully. His face paled. He understood. The clause, buried in the supplemental merger contract, had been my idea. It stated that in the event the wedding was publicly called off by any Carter family member before final execution, Alice Global would retain controlling interest, not jointly but in full. And not to my father. To me. He hadn't seen it. Neither had the Carters' legal team. I had made sure of it. I straightened, lifted my chin, and kept walking. The grand doors of the ballroom opened before me. Hotel staff stood frozen in disbelief. One dropped a tray of champagne flutes. The shattering sound echoed like a gunshot. Outside, the Rolls-Royce idled by the curb. The driver opened the door with confusion written all over his face. I stepped inside. Alone. He glanced at me through the mirror. No husband? He asked before he could stop himself. No, I said softly. Just a future. By the time we pulled away from the hotel, I had already removed the veil. My fingers felt no tremor as I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. There was only one number under in case of emergency. It wasn't my father. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't even my assistant. It was Mr. Blackwell. He picked up on the first ring. Yes, Ms. Ellis? Execute Plan Orion, I said. My voice did not shake. Pause. Are you sure? I'm certain. Understood. The call ended. The city blurred past the window. I didn't cry. The tears had been trained out of me years ago. I returned to the penthouse. The one on 87th, overlooking Central Park. It was mine, bought with my own money, my own equity. The concierge bowed, his face etched with pity. I didn't need it. Once inside, I kicked off the custom Louboutins I had worn for him. I stepped out of the dress. Let it pool on the marble like something dead. In a silk slip, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over Manhattan. The city lights blinked. I raised a glass of untouched champagne to the glass. To you, Vanessa, I whispered. And to the empire you just handed me. 3 hours later, my social media was in flames. The wedding that wasn't trended across platforms. Screenshots. Theories. Paparazzi shots. Hashtags I didn't care about. My assistant Miranda called me 5 times. I didn't answer. My mother texted. My father emailed. Vanessa, he called once. I let it ring. Then I typed a single command into a private browser on my laptop. Alice Carter Holdings, backend portaled secure access. I entered the password, E14G.rosegold. Orion. The site opened. A control panel appeared. Asset distribution. Clause triggers. Legal emergency protocols. I clicked confirm. Under the clause Charles Carter should have deleted when he had the chance. The transfer was instant. I now owned 52% of Ellis Carter Holdings. The company, the power, the empire. All mine. Nathan had left me at the altar. But in doing so he handed me the only vow I'd ever truly wanted. Control. 3 days after the wedding that wasn't, I sat in my office on the 52nd floor of Ellis Tower, watching streaks of rain cut through the skyline like slashes on glass. The city looked different through the storm, softer, blurred, as if pretending not to recognize me. That was fine. I didn't recognize myself either. I hadn't left the building since I stepped off the elevator that Sunday afternoon in my slip, my wedding dress discarded on the marble floor of my penthouse. My team assumed I was mourning. They didn't know that inside my silence, something precise and ruthless was blooming. I wasn't devastated. I was calculating. I had been trained for power since I could walk. But now I wasn't just the Ellis heiress. I was the majority owner of Ellis Carter Holdings. And the people who thought they broke me had no idea that they had only set me free. There was no press conference. No social media statement. No interviews. Only a whisper campaign in every boardroom that mattered. She didn't cry. She walked away smiling. She owns it all now, doesn't she? Let them wonder. I sipped espresso and turned back to the black portfolio Catherine had placed on my desk that morning. "Everything you requested from archives, Ms. Ellis," she had said, her voice clipped as always. "It's all here. Stamped across the top in silver ink. Carter Ellis Holdings, Formation and Structure." I flipped it open and stared down at the past 15 years of curated history. Photographs came first. Nathan and me, age 7, building sandcastles on a Hampton beach. My father and Charles Carter in the background, cigars in hand, talking mergers and legacy while we played pretend in the sand. Vanessa wasn't in any of them. She hadn't been invited on those early trips. She was too young. Too delicate. Back then Nathan had been my only friend. I had liked him truly. Before everything became about business and lineage and calculated compatibility, we had shared things no contract could define. But that was a long time ago. And I was no longer a child. I set the photos aside and pulled out another file. One not in the portfolio but from my own private collection. It was a photograph from my college graduation. Nathan on one side. Me in the center. And on my other side, Jonathan Wright. Charles Carter's younger brother. A former finance professor. A silent partner. A man far too perceptive to survive in the Carter family unscathed. He had been my mentor. My strategist. And, for a time, my closest confidant. "You have the mind for war," Jonathan once told me. "But the patience for empire. That's rare, Sabrina. Don't waste it on sentiment." He was the one who had taught me how to read a balance sheet like a lie detector. How to smell offshore laundering in layered subsidiaries. How to move quietly while everyone else shouted. He had also promised me something before he died. "Someday," he had said, "you won't need Ellis Global or Carter and Company. You'll be the market." And then 3 years ago Jonathan's yacht accidentally capsized in the Caribbean. He died alone. The cause was ruled mechanical failure. But I never bought it. Especially not after Charles took control of Jonathan's silent shares in Carter and Company. Less than 2 weeks later. I remembered the eulogy. I remembered the polite tears. I remembered the look on Charles's face when I asked him if Jonathan had updated his will. He had blinked. And said, "What does it matter now?" It was Jonathan who had introduced the idea of contingency clauses. Ownership triggers buried deep in merger contracts that could only be activated under highly specific, publicly humiliating conditions. Like, say, being left at the altar. Clause 14.c wasn't written for Nathan. It was written for me. Jonathan had warned me even then. Love him if you want. But never let him be your plan. I turned to my laptop and opened the secure file Jonathan had set up before his death. A 16-digit encrypted folder only I had the decryption code for. Inside were legal blueprints. Notes on shell companies. A partial map of Carter and Company's darker dealings. He had been gathering evidence. And now it was mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. "He's here. No appointment. Do you want me to send him away?" I stared at the name on the screen. Nathan. I paused. Then typed, "Not yet. Let him wait 30 minutes. I didn't wait in silence. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Mr. Blackwell. He answered immediately. "Ms. Ellis. Put the legal audit team on standby. I said. We'll need a full forensic analysis of every Carter account linked to our merged holdings. I thought we were waiting. We're done waiting. A beat of silence. Understood. When Nathan was finally allowed into my office, he looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles. Slumped shoulders. The perfect tuxedo now replaced by a navy jacket and visible shame. Sabrina. I held up a hand. Don't speak yet. He stood awkwardly shifting between feet. I know there's no excuse. There isn't. I didn't know how to tell you. It wasn't, Vanessa didn't mean for it to happen that way. We were drunk. Once. My head tilted slightly. He mistook that for softness. She's pregnant. That I already knew. I just didn't know whether the child was real, or a ploy. And your solution was to humiliate me publicly? I asked calmly. His face twisted in guilt. I panicked. No, I corrected. You were cowardly. He said nothing. I stood and walked around the desk, stopping inches from him. You didn't just lose me, Nathan. You lost everything. His eyes darted. My father, he's furious. But he says if you walk this back. I laughed softly. You still think I'm here to negotiate? I just thought maybe. His voice faltered. You still love me. I studied him. I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe I didn't care to find out. Love doesn't survive betrayal, I said. And neither will your family's empire. His jaw clenched. I returned to my seat and pressed the intercom. Catherine, send him out. As the door shut behind him, I whispered to myself. Let the storm begin. The elevator doors opened directly into the executive floor of Ellis Carter Holdings. I hadn't been here in almost 4 weeks. Not since the wedding, that wasn't. Not since Nathan's betrayal. The air felt the same, cold, crisp, filtered, but something had changed. Me. Gone were the soft waves of honey blonde hair my mother had loved. In their place was a sleek black bob, parted cleanly to the side, its sharp edges kissing the collar of my coat like punctuation marks. I didn't wear Ellis cream or Carter navy. I wore black. All of it tailored. All of it mine. The receptionist who'd once attended my engagement party and spilled champagne in excitement over the announcement, blinked in confusion as I walked past her desk. Miss Ellis. I know where I'm going, I said without slowing down. Her mouth opened then closed. Good. The boardroom doors were shut as expected. I checked my watch. 7 minutes past the scheduled start time. Perfect. Charles Carter would already be mid-presentation, trying to project control as if the last month hadn't destabilized everything he'd built. I didn't knock. I pushed open the doors like they were mine. As now they were. 20 heads turned. Silence collapsed the room. Charles stood at the head of the long mahogany table, one hand on a clicker, the other mid-gesture in front of a quarterly projections slide. Nathan was seated to his right. His posture stiff. His face pale. His eyes met mine, wide, unreadable, and then fell to the polished table. Miss Ellis, Charles said, recovering with a too-practiced smile. This is a closed session for Ellis Carter board members only. If you'd like to schedule. That won't be necessary, I said, walking to the table. I set a leather portfolio down in front of Harold Whitman, head of legal and longtime Carter loyalist. He had once called me dear girl at every shareholder luncheon. He didn't today. This is a certified notification of controlling interest transfer, I said coolly. As of 9 a.m. yesterday, I hold 52% of voting shares in Ellis Carter Holdings. Gasps. Murmurs. Chair legs scraped against polished wood. Harold's hands shook as he opened the document. This can't be correct, he muttered, scanning the signatures. It is, I said. Clause 14.c. The wedding was publicly terminated by a Carter heir. The clause was triggered automatically. Your oversight is not my concern. Charles's face drained of color. Nonsense, he snapped. That clause was ceremonial. It wasn't enforceable. Then you shouldn't have signed it, I replied. But you did. And the documents were verified by your own counsel. We can review them again if you'd like. I turned toward Harold. But that might delay what I'm about to say. Harold looked at Charles. Charles didn't nod, but he didn't stop him either. The clause is valid, Harold said quietly. And the shares are now under Ms. Ellis's authority. The room erupted. I didn't move. I waited. When the noise faded, I spoke. This meeting will continue, I said. But you're right about one thing, Charles. I walked toward the head of the table. Your services as CEO, I said, are no longer required. Charles didn't move at first. Then he leaned in close, too close. You won't get away with this, he whispered. I leaned closer. I already have. I gestured toward the seat. He didn't fight it. He stepped aside. I sat at the head of the table, not beside a man, not behind one, not quietly waiting for my turn. I took my place. I will begin by calling for a full forensic audit, I said. Every Ellis Carter account from the past 5 years. I want special attention on offshore transactions and subsidiary transfers following the death of Jonathan Wright. The name hit the air like a lit match. Richard's younger brother. Nathan's uncle. My mentor. Several board members shifted in their chairs, avoiding eye contact. One cleared his throat. Another scribbled something on a legal pad that was clearly already blank. They knew. They had always known. And just to be clear, I continued, this is not revenge. I looked at Nathan. His throat bobbed. He didn't speak. This, I said, is justice. For Jonathan. For what was taken from him. And what was denied to all of us in the name of Carter legacy. No one argued. No one stood. My first week as acting CEO was surgical. I didn't start with the people Charles had trained to obey. I didn't want yes men. I went looking for his enemies. Jonathan's allies. People like Eliza Ching, once the firm's chief financial strategist before Charles restructured her out of her position and exiled her to a back office in Singapore. She had kept her head down, filed reports no one read, and quietly built contingency plans of her own. I brought her back. I gave her the corner office across from mine. James Novak, Jonathan's legal advisor, relocated to Tokyo under the guise of Asia-Pacific strategy, the week after the funeral. He was on the next red-eye home. And Dr. Amara Okafor, former head of research and a brilliant mind Charles encouraged into early retirement at 52. She returned with a sharper voice and the same unmatched insight. They weren't loyal to me. Not yet. But they had been loyal to Jonathan. And that was enough. By Friday the executive floor had changed. Photos of Charles and Nathan had disappeared from the walls. The new logo, a temporary one with neutral typography, stood where the Carter family crest used to hang. My name wasn't yet on the press releases. But it would be. Not everyone was pleased. Marcus Reed, the current CFO and Charles's closest confidant, scheduled a private meeting with me that Friday afternoon. He arrived in a charcoal pinstripe suit and an artificial smile. You've made quite a splash, he said, taking the seat across from my desk without waiting to be invited. Did you come here to flatter me, Marcus? I asked, not looking up. He chuckled. Just stating facts. But I do have concerns. I assumed you would. Reactivating Jonathan's old team, he said, will raise questions. It's supposed to. You're making enemies. I looked up. You say that like it's a warning. It is. I set my pen down. Marcus, this company is infested with people who watched Jonathan die and stayed silent. That makes me enemies good. At least now I know who's who. He shifted forward, planting his palms flat on my desk. Richard Carter built this empire. It was never meant for you. I leaned in. Richard Carter made one mistake that I care about, I said, voice low. He underestimated me. Don't repeat it. He smiled tightly. Noted. When he left, I didn't relax. I reached for the phone. Catherine. I said. Yes, Ms. Ellis? I want everything on Marcus Reed. Financials. Calls. Off-books meetings. And anything linking him to offshore accounts. There was a pause. Already working on it. That night I walked into my penthouse alone, just like I had after the wedding. But this time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt aligned. It had begun. The empire wasn't his anymore. It was mine. And I was just getting started. The documents were endless. Invoices, offshore account trails, encrypted spreadsheets, redacted emails. They sprawled across my desk like a map to a kingdom no one wanted to claim, except me. I had spent the last 6 days buried in the shadows Jonathan Wright tried to expose before his death. Now I was following the breadcrumbs. And they all led back to Charles Carter. But something wasn't adding up. It wasn't just greed. It was fear. Rain battered the glass walls of my penthouse as I stood in the living room at 3:12 a.m. barefoot in a black silk robe, staring at the encrypted drive Eliza had delivered hours earlier. Extracted from old server backups, she'd said. Jonathan kept copies. Timestamps match his last known login, the night before his death. The night he boarded his yacht. The night the Cassandra went down. I inserted the drive. A folder opened. /JW priority /. Inside were 3 subfolders. Accounts. Correspondence. Final reports. I clicked correspondence first. There it was, the last email Jonathan ever sent. To s.ellis@ellisglobal.com. Subject, urgent. Something isn't right. Charles has been moving large sums off books. Significant amounts. I've uncovered more than financial misdirection. Sabrina, this goes deeper. We need to talk when I return. Tell no one. He never returned. The email was time-stamped at 4:07 p.m. The Cassandra was scheduled to depart at 10 a.m. the next day. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding quietly. Not from fear, from clarity. Jonathan hadn't died by accident. He had been silenced. I moved to accounts. Inside, dozens of spreadsheet files. Offshore transfer records. Shell company trails originating in Eastern Europe, routing through subsidiaries massed under construction deals and international consulting fees. The amounts? Hundreds of millions. Some dating back nearly a decade. Laundered through dummy arms of Carter and Company. The final file was labeled Midas and Akifagu. I opened it. A flowchart of names, company tags, percentages, and one name kept reappearing at junction points. Richard Novak. A name I didn't recognize. I searched our internal directory. Nothing. Then I searched internal communications with encrypted access. Still nothing. Finally, I turned to Jonathan's private logs. Under a list titled Aliases, Charles Carter, I found it. Richard Novak equals Charles Carter. Alias used for untraceable payments. A name created to avoid IRS and FSA flags. Buried in layered encryption. It wasn't just Jonathan who knew. Charles had planned everything. Including a fake identity. Including his brother's death. My intercom buzzed. Catherine's voice. Miss Ellis. There's someone here to see you. No appointment. No assistant. Says his name is Christopher Carter. I froze. Christopher. I echoed. She hesitated. He says it's about Jonathan. Send him up. The last time I had seen Christopher Carter was at a family function 2 years ago. Tall, disheveled, quieter than his older brother Nathan, and infinitely less interested in business. He was Charles's second son, the soft one, according to corporate gossip. He painted, studied architecture in Berlin. Rumored to be the disappointment of the family. But when he stepped into my office now, he didn't look like a disappointment. He looked like someone carrying truth too heavy for one man. Sabrina, he said, closing the door behind him. Christopher. We stared at each other for a moment. I need to talk to you, he said. About what really happened to Jonathan. And about what my father's planning to do to you. He pulled a flash drive from his coat and handed it to me. I've been collecting evidence since Jonathan died. He was like a second father to me. Why me? I asked, plugging the drive in. Why bring this now? Because my father's desperate, he said. And you're not safe. The files loaded. Dozens of them. The phone call recordings between Charles and foreign consultants. Wire transfers to shell corporations in Latvia and Cyprus. A transcript of a voice memo. If Jonathan talks, we're all done. It's either him or us. And surveillance footage. Grainy black and white. Dated. 2 nights before the Cassandra sank. A marina dock. Jonathan's yacht. The Cassandra. Still moored. A shadowed figure approaches a man working on the boat. The figure leans in. Hands him an envelope. Turns. Walks toward the camera. Even in low resolution I knew that face. Charles Carter. How did you get this? I whispered. Christopher sat across from me, shoulders hunched, eyes bloodshot. I've been watching him for years, he said. After my mother died he changed. Jonathan was the only one who ever stood up to him. And you? I asked. I stayed quiet. Until I realized what silence cost. My mind raced. My breathing didn't. What is he planning? I asked. Christopher looked up, something haunted in his gaze. To destroy you, he said. He's already lost the company. But if you make the wrong move, he'll bury everyone involved. My voice sharpened. Is he targeting my family? Christopher hesitated. I overheard him say something about your parents. That they needed containment. I stood instantly and picked up my phone. Blackwell answered on the second ring. Get them out, I said. Tonight. The Switzerland property. Private jet. Non-public route. No paper trail. And send security detail, level 4. He didn't question me. He never did. When I ended the call, I turned back to Christopher. Thank you for telling me. He looked uncertain. I don't trust easily, I added. So don't mistake this for alliance. Not yet. He nodded. You shouldn't trust anyone, he said quietly. Especially not anyone named Carter. That night after Christopher left, I stood at the window again. Rain tapped the glass like static. Relentless, cold cleansing. I looked down at Manhattan, at the pulsing grid of lights and steel that once felt like a battlefield. No, it was a chessboard. And I had just claimed the queen. The screen split into two halves. On one side, Charles Carter standing at a podium in the Davis Carter Media Room, dressed in a somber gray suit with a red tie, the Carter crest pinned to his lapel. On the other, our company's stock ticker, flashing in real time as it began to fall. It had already dropped 3% before he spoke a single word. He looks composed, Eliza muttered beside me, standing with arms crossed. Too composed, said James Novak from the other side of the room. Which means he's lying. I remained silent, arms at my sides, watching the man I had just dethroned attempt to retake his throne the only way men like Charles knew how. With a camera. And a lie. It is with great regret, Charles began, his voice slow and measured, that I must address recent developments within Ellis Carter Holdings. He paused. Looked down. Rehearsed sorrow. Over the past week, we have uncovered disturbing evidence suggesting deliberate manipulation of our corporate merger, and of our financial and strategic structure, by Ms. Sabrina Ellis. There was the why. Delivered cleanly. Without hesitation. The stock price dropped again, another 2%. Beside me, Dr. Okafor shook her head. He's weaponizing your silence, she said. He won't like what happens when I speak, I replied. The reporters in the media room leaned forward. Cameras clicked. Lights flashed. Nathan appeared then, stepping beside his father, dressed in a navy suit and looking like a man barely holding himself together. He didn't meet the cameras directly, which made him look believable, which made me furious. I never wanted this to become public, Nathan said, voice carefully strained. But Ms. Ellis used her access to our private relationship to manipulate internal company records, specifically documents tied to my late uncle, Jonathan Wright. I blinked. I had anticipated lies. But that. He was accusing me of forging the will. Falsifying communications from Jonathan. He was rewriting history in front of the world. She had access to my uncle's private files, Nathan continued. And we have evidence that she altered them to create the illusion of wrongdoing where there was none. The reporters exploded with questions. Charles held up a hand. In light of these findings, he said, we are formally requesting that the board of Ellis Carter Holdings suspend Ms. Ellis from her executive duties pending a full criminal investigation. The stock dropped another 4%. I muted the TV. Silence fell across the executive suite. Outside the glass wall of my office, employees stared anxiously at their phones, whispering in hushed voices. I could feel the weight of their eyes. My empire was shaking. But it was not crumbling. Marcus is behind this, Eliza said flatly. He has access. He knows the language you and Jonathan used. He's helped them build the narrative. He won't be the only one, I said. James stepped closer. We should consider releasing a counter-statement. Not yet, I said. Why? He asked. Because the truth doesn't need to rush. It just needs to land. Catherine entered a moment later, holding a sealed envelope. This came for you just now. Marked urgent. Hand-delivered. No return address. I took it. Unsealed it. Inside was a single note, typed in Charles's preferred font. 24 hours. Resign and return control. Or I release everything I have on your father. Your choice. I stared at the paper. Then at the room. Eliza's expression hardened. He's bluffing. No, I said quietly. He's not. My father had been many things, distant, ambitious, cold. But clean? No. There were years he had operated in gray zones. Nothing I could prove. But enough I suspected. Charles had records of that. He's betting I'll sacrifice justice to protect my family, I murmured. Will you? Came a voice behind me. I turned. Christopher. He had entered without fanfare as he often did now. He looked more like his uncle every day, solemn, steady, observing the room like he was always calculating where the next move might strike. I haven't decided yet, I said. But the truth was, yes, I would protect my family. Even if it meant bleeding first. The intercom buzzed again. Miss Ellis, Victoria is on line 1. She says it's urgent. The room fell silent. Put her on speaker. Catherine nodded. A click. Then her voice. Sabrina, I need to see you. It's about Charles. It's important. My fingers curled around the edge of the desk. Why would you come to me? I asked, my voice as sharp as a scalpel. You already gave him everything. You don't understand. He's planning something worse than anything I knew. He's not just targeting you anymore. What are you talking about? I said coldly. There was a beat of silence. Then, meet me, please. Millennium Hotel. Room 1214. I found something he doesn't know I have. The line clicked off. She's bluffing, James said. She's terrified, Eliza countered. You heard her. She's done enough damage. She might be our way in, Christopher said. They all turned to me. What do you want to do? He asked. I looked out at the skyline. The stock was still falling. My father's name was now a bargaining chip. And the only woman who might have the missing piece was the sister who ruined my life. I'll go, I said. Christopher stepped forward. I'm coming with you. I didn't argue. We left the building quietly, back exit. As the car slid into traffic, I didn't speak. I only stared at the envelope on my lap. And thought. Charles just declared war. And I was done playing defense. The Millennium Hotel always smelled like cold money and curated discretion. Room 1214 was at the far end of the hallway. Plush carpet muted my steps, but nothing dulled the tension. Christopher walked beside me, silent, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't ask why I hadn't sent security. He didn't ask why I was doing this at all. He knew. Sometimes the only way out of a trap is through it. I knocked once. The door opened immediately. Victoria stood there, looking like the ghost of the sister I used to know. Her skin was pale beneath too much makeup, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. Her hand rested instinctively over her belly. A gesture that once haunted me. Now I questioned everything. Sabrina, she said. Thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet, I replied. She stepped back to let us in. The suite was dimly lit. Champagne bottles, half empty, stood on the table beside a tray of untouched fruit. A manila folder sat beneath them. I have something, Victoria said, her voice shaking. I overheard Charles talking to Marcus. He said I've served my purpose. She looked at me with wide, frantic eyes. I think he's going to get rid of me. I didn't respond. Because I didn't trust her. And because I wasn't here for emotional unraveling. I was here for evidence. I know what I did, she said quickly. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. But you don't understand, he promised me protection. He said if I helped him distract you. By sleeping with Nathan? I cut in. She flinched. No. That was different. It only happened once. He said it would be better for the family if I raised a hand. She fell silent. Tell me what you found, I said flatly. She walked to the table and opened the manila folder. Inside were printed screenshots, copied emails, transaction receipts. Jonathan had a private server, she said. I found it. It holds everything. The real files. Not the ones Charles doctored. Jonathan knew where the money was going. I leaned in. So did Christopher. And you have access? I asked. Victoria nodded. I copied the login keys before Charles wiped the company logs. Why give them to me? I asked. She swallowed hard. Because if he's willing to throw me away, what do you think he'll do to you? I took the folder without another word and turned to leave. Sabrina, Victoria started. I stopped at the door but didn't look back. Did you ever love him? I asked. There was a long pause. Then, I loved that he didn't look at me the way everyone always looked at you. I didn't answer. I simply walked out. Back at Ellis Tower, Christopher and I rode the elevator in silence. But my mind was a storm. I didn't trust Victoria, not fully. But I knew Charles. And I knew fear when I saw it. Eliza, I said the moment I stepped into the office. We need to verify everything. She was already on it. Catherine had called ahead. First, I said, handing her the folder, match these files to Jonathan's encryption signature. Already have his pattern on record, she replied, opening her tablet. Second, I said, verify Victoria's pregnancy. That made her look up. You think she's lying? I think, I said slowly, Charles has always understood leverage. And what better way to trap two heiresses than with a child that doesn't exist? Within minutes, Eliza had her answer. 3 payments. All to a private FX studio in Brooklyn. The recipient? An actress posing as a maternity specialist. Specialty? High-grade prosthetics for film and medical simulations. She was never pregnant, Eliza said, shaking her head. The belly? It's silicone. I closed my eyes just for a moment. Not in pain. In calculation. The betrayal, the tears, the scandal. It had all been an elaborate trap. And I had almost fallen for it. James entered next with more information. We cross-referenced the files Victoria gave you. The login keys are legit. This is Jonathan's server. He pulled up the mirrored files on the screen in front of us. Dozens of encrypted folders. One marked, blackened. Inside, clean evidence of laundering. Dirty money from Russian oligarchs. Funneled through shell firms tied to Carter and Company. And masked under Ellis Global's clean accounts post-merger. Jonathan had been 2 steps from blowing the entire operation open. Which is why Charles killed him. Eliza's eyes were steady on mine. If we go public with this, she said, Charles will launch everything he has on your father. He'll launch it anyway, I replied. He'll take down your entire family. I looked around the room. At James. At Eliza. At Christopher standing near the glass wall, arms crossed. He's already tried to take everything from me, I said. All that's left now is whether he survives what comes next. I returned to my office and called Catherine. Get me an emergency board meeting, I said. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. full quorum. Mandatory attendance. Under what grounds? Corporate crime. Internal sabotage. Laundering. Fraud. Conspiracy. I paused. Also, bring in federal observers. FBI. And SEC. She didn't ask questions. She knew I never wasted moves. The intercom buzzed again. Mr. Reed is here, Catherine said. Says it's urgent. Marcus. Right on time. Send him in. He walked in with visible panic. No tie. Shirt collar open. Sweat at his temples. Sabrina, he said. There's been a breach. I gestured to the seat across from me. You don't say. He sat, glancing nervously at Christopher, who lingered near the corner. We detected an attempt to access the offshore accounts. Someone tried to move $50 million into an untraceable fund. I know, I said. He froze. What? I know you did it. Marcus blinked. Sabrina, I turned my laptop screen toward him. Time stamps. Server logs. His ID badge entry. Security footage. All pointing to him. I could have you arrested today, I said calmly. Or what? Or you cooperate. He stared at me. Then finally he broke. Richard has leverage, he said. On your father. Serious fraud. Tax evasion. Things that would bury your family for decades. He's bluffing. He's not. And yet you're still here. Begging. He swallowed hard. Because if I don't flip, he'll destroy me too. I smiled faintly. You're not wrong. When he left, I called Eliza. Flag Marcus. Don't trust anything he says. But don't stop him either. You think he'll run to Charles? I'm counting on it. That night I stood in front of my window again. New York glimmered below me. The boardroom was set. The evidence locked. The feds briefed. And Charles? He'd arrive in his best suit ready to bury me. He didn't know that by tomorrow morning I'd be holding the shovel. The boardroom at Ellis Carter Holdings had never been this full. It was 9:58 a.m. 27 members of the board, senior legal counsel, compliance officers, department heads and financial advisors filled every seat. Some sat stiff in their tailored suits, others whispering into phones, their eyes darting to the display screens mounted across the room. 2 men stood at the back wall in identical black suits, their expressions unreadable. FBI. Financial Crimes Division. Beside them sat a silent observer from the SE. I stood at the head of the table. Not seated. Standing. Because when you're about to collapse the structure of a dynasty, you do it from your feet. At exactly 10 a.m. the glass doors opened. Charles Carter entered, flanked by 2 lawyers. He looked every inch the war general, polished, upright, defiant. His red tie was perfectly knotted. His expression smug. Nathan followed, quieter. He avoided my eyes. Ms. Ellis, Charles said, smiling like we were at brunch. I understand you've called this meeting to announce your resignation. A low chuckle passed through the room. I didn't smile. Not quite, I said. The doors opened again. Eliza walked in, handing thick folders to each board member. What is this? The chairman asked as he flipped open the pages. Evidence, I replied. Of what really happened to Jonathan Wright. And what Charles Carter has done since. Murmurs rippled through the room as graphs, emails, and audit logs came into view. Banking records. Offshore trails. Shell companies in Eastern Europe. Transactions filtered through dozens of Carter and Company subsidiaries, all of them tied to Russian oligarchs and criminal networks. These operations were hidden from the board, I said calmly, and funneled through Ellis Global's clean assets post-merger. You all signed off on financials that were already poisoned. Charles scoffed. This is absurd. The documentation has been independently verified, I said, and cross-checked against Jonathan Wright's private server, which we accessed last night. A screen lit up behind me. It displayed Jonathan's final email. Something isn't right. Charles has been moving significant sums. Tell no one. The date, 1 day before his death. Security footage from the marina shows Charles delivering a cash envelope to the yacht's mechanic the night before Jonathan's scheduled departure, I said. The footage played. Gasps. Silence. This is circumstantial, Charles said, his voice suddenly louder. And irrelevant to this meeting. Is it? I turned to the board. Because this money laundering wasn't just criminal. It was strategic. And it relied on one thing: access to Ellis Global's clean structure. I gestured to another file, which was obtained under false pretenses. I walked to the far end of the table. Victoria Bennett, my sister. Planted by Charles. Under his directive, she fed him internal Ellis data for over a year. Lies. Charles barked. She posed as the accidental pregnancy, another manipulation to keep me under control. The pregnancy was fake. The prosthetic belly was purchased with money traced directly to a Carter-controlled slush fund. More documents were passed. Screens showed payment logs. Digital receipts. Charles's lawyers whispered frantically. One of them paled. And Nathan? I turned to him. He participated willingly. Or perhaps unwittingly. But when asked to publicly humiliate me at the altar, he complied. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. Not now. Do you have anything to say? I asked Charles, facing him fully. He stood. His voice trembled with rage. Whatever you think you've done, you don't know the full picture. Jonathan was naive. He was going to destroy everything our family built. I did what had to be done. The admission stunned the room. You killed him, Nathan whispered. I protected us. Charles roared. The FBI stepped forward. For the record, this meeting is being observed as part of a federal investigation into corporate fraud, conspiracy, and potential involvement in the suspicious death of Jonathan Wright, one agent said. Charles froze. That's when he clutched his chest. Paled. Collapsed. Panic ensued. Chairs scraped. Lawyers shouted. Someone screamed. Christopher was at his side first, lowering him to the floor. Call 911, he said. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Charles was wheeled out on a stretcher, Nathan following, stunned, confused. When the room settled again, the chairman turned to me. In light of these revelations, I believe this meeting must be adjourned until. With respect, I said, there's still company business to address. The board stared at me. I continued. We need stability. Effective immediately, I propose Charles Carter be removed as CEO. On grounds of incapacitation and ethical failure. No one objected. I further propose that Nathan Carter be removed from all operational roles pending legal review. A few hesitant nods. Then full agreement. Then who leads the company? The chairman asked. I didn't hesitate. Christopher Carter. Gasps. Eyes turned to the man standing beside me. He looked stunned. He has the name, I said, but not the corruption. And he was the one who helped me expose this. He deserves a chance. The chairman nodded slowly. And you? I remain as controlling shareholder and chair of the ethics committee. My focus will be rebuilding trust, with regulators, with the market, and with our people. After the board voted to confirm the leadership changes, Christopher stepped close. Why me? He asked quietly. After everything my family did to you? I looked at him. Because this was never about destroying Davis Carter, I said. It was about honoring Jonathan. And building something better from what he left behind. The Davis Carter boardroom was empty now. The same room where Charles once declared war was eerily silent, except for the slow, precise clicking of Christopher's pen. He sat at the end of the long glass table, his suit slightly rumpled, a faint shadow under his eyes. But he looked steady. Not powerful. Not boastful. Steady. Are you sure you want me here? He asked again, softer this time. I didn't choose you for your last name, I said, closing the file in front of me. I chose you because you were the only one who never tried to own anything that didn't belong to you. He met my eyes. I just wanted the truth to come out. It did. And now we clean up the ashes. In the days following Charles's collapse and arrest, headlines swarmed every screen. Empire of lies. Carter patriarch faces charges for laundering and fraud. Fake pregnancy, murder cover-up, and billion-dollar deception. Inside the fall of Davis Carter. The woman who didn't flinch, Sabrina Ellis, reclaims control. I ignored most of them. Let the world scream. Let them chew on the scandal. I had no interest in their shock. I was already building something new. We held the first internal restructuring meeting 3 days after Charles was taken into custody. Christopher chaired the session. I observed silently from the side, letting him speak. He was good. He didn't pretend to be his father. Didn't quote numbers with arrogance or slam the table for dominance. He listened. Asked the right questions. Replaced toxic department heads with rising voices who had long been ignored. I don't want to own Jonathan's legacy, he told the room. I want to honor it. That was the moment I saw it, the shift. Not in him. In them. Executives who once feared Charles, now nodded at Christopher. Some even smiled. Because fear was no longer the currency. Respect was. Later that evening I returned to my penthouse. I was halfway through changing when the doorbell rang. Victoria. Wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair tied back, no performance in sight. She held up a USB drive. It's the last copy, she said. Every email. Every file. Every lie I ever participated in. I said nothing, letting the weight of her own shame fill the silence. I was scared, she continued. Charles said you'd never forgive me. That I'd always be your shadow. I believed him. He needed you to believe that, I said. So you'd stay useful. Tears pricked her eyes. I'm not asking to be family again, she whispered. But if there's a way, I want to fix what I helped destroy. I looked at the drive. Then at her. Then start with yourself. She blinked. What? Take the money Charles gave you. All of it. And build something real. Not for me. For you. Her lip trembled. I didn't flinch. She left quietly. The next day, Alexander Davis was arrested at JFK Airport attempting to board a private plane to Dubai. He had denied everything for weeks, called the investigation a witch hunt, claimed Sabrina Ellis was a scorned woman looking for revenge. But the evidence spoke louder. Offshore holdings under his name. A confidential document detailing the fake pregnancy plan. initialed in his handwriting. He went down swinging, but he still went down. The market barely flinched. Davis Carter shares had stabilized. Investors had moved on, because the company was no longer about him. It was about us. Christopher called me the following week. "There's something you should see," he said. I met him at the South Pier Marina. He stood by the edge of the dock staring at the water. In his hands, a sealed wooden box. "Jonathan had this in storage," he explained. "Instructions to open it only if things ever went south." Inside, a handwritten letter. To me. "Sabrina, if you're reading this, then the storm came for me. And I'm sorry. You always saw through the noise. Always aimed for the truth even when it cut you. That's why I trusted you more than anyone. If they take me down, build something better. Not just cleaner, stronger. Kinder. And please, don't become them to beat them. You're better than that. Jonathan." I stared at his handwriting, heart aching. Not from grief. From responsibility. That night I stood at the windows of the new operations floor in our restructured HQ. Ellis Global would be rebranded under a new name soon. One not tied to corruption or betrayal. One that stood on Jonathan's ethics, not Charles's greed. Behind me, my team worked late. Not because they were forced to, but because they believed in the new foundation. "Miss Ellis," Eliza said, entering quietly. "The European regulators just approved the clean asset portfolio transfer. We're officially solvent and clear." I nodded. "And Marcus?" "Turn state's evidence. His immunity deal goes through next week." "Good. Let the rats escape so long as they pulled the shipwreck into view." Christopher appeared beside me holding a tablet. "We're ready for the relaunch. Final name." I turned to him and smiled. "Right Holdings." He blinked. "Jonathan would have liked that." "No," I said softly. "He would have argued with me about it." Then smiled quietly when no one was watching. The chandeliers at the new Right Holdings headquarters were designed to reflect the city skyline. Not mimic it. Reflect it. That was the entire point of this night, our relaunch gala. A company reborn. Not through denial. Not through erasure. But through confrontation. We didn't burn the past to the ground. We studied the ashes and built differently. Outside the grand ballroom, the new company logo gleamed across digital panels. A minimalist design. Sharp lines. Clean colors. Under it the new motto. Transparency is the new power. Inside, nearly 500 guests mingled in gowns and tuxedos. Executives. Journalists. Former skeptics. Now converted believers. They sipped champagne under soft golden light and spoke of innovation like it had a pulse. And for once I wasn't working the room. I was watching it. As tonight. I didn't have to fight for a seat at the table. I owned the table. Eliza stood beside me in a midnight blue dress, her hair swept up in a twist so sharp it could have cut through steel. "You know," she said, tilting her glass toward the crowd, "there's a rumor going around that the ghost of Charles Carter still haunts old conference rooms." I smiled. "Good. Let them remember the cautionary tale." "You did it, Sabrina." I didn't say thank you. Because the truth was, I hadn't done it alone. Christopher emerged from the crowd wearing a classic black suit, no tie, shirt collar relaxed. He looked calm. Not polished. Not trying. Just present. "Are you ready for your moment?" he asked, offering his arm. "I've had enough moments," I said. "I'm more interested in the ones no one sees." He nodded, then gently guided me toward the center of the room. A spotlight adjusted. Silence swept over the ballroom. And then applause. Not thunderous. Not wild. Steady. Purposeful. Respectful. It felt real. The MC took the microphone. "Tonight we honor the woman who took what was broken, what was bleeding, and didn't just bandage it. She restructured it, rewrote it, and redefined it." A large screen behind him lit up. Clips rolled. News anchors announcing Charles's arrest. My press conference with federal agencies. Snippets of boardroom footage. Side-by-side shots of the old Davis Carter logo and the new Right Holdings symbol. At the board table. At the SEC hearing. At the gala. They called it a redemption arc. But I knew better. This wasn't redemption. This was reclamation. I stepped up to the microphone. Looked at the crowd. Then slowly at the front row. "Christopher. Victoria standing quietly near the back, no entourage, no spotlight, just present. I cleared my throat. Some inherit legacies, I began. Some destroy them. And some of us, very few of us, get to rebuild them from ruins. The room was silent. I continued. I was never the loudest person in the room. Never the one who slammed fists or raised voices. I was the woman they told to smile more. To sit still. To trust others who knew better. Soft laughter from a few corners. I was engaged to a man who stood by while his father sabotaged everything my family built. I was betrayed at my own wedding. I was dragged through public scrutiny, humiliated on live television, and buried under headlines I didn't write. More silence. But here's the thing about being buried, I said, voice steady. If you're buried in soil, not concrete, that's not death. It's planting. A quiet murmur of approval. I grew back. After the speech, the crowd erupted. For once, I let the applause in. Not for the praise, but for the finality. The ending. I stepped down from the stage. Christopher was waiting with 2 glasses of champagne. One for legacy, he said. And one for peace. Which one is which? I asked. He handed me both. You've earned the right to decide. We stood at the far end of the ballroom watching the rest unfold. Dancers swayed. Cameras flashed. Deals were quietly discussed. Journalists hovered but didn't dare approach. Not tonight. Not when the room had made up its mind. I was no longer the scandal. I was the standard. Do you ever miss it? Christopher asked after a long silence. Miss what? The old version of everything. Before the bloodbath. I thought about it. About the naive girl who once picked out orchids for her wedding without knowing her groom had already picked someone else. About the daughter who tried to honor her father's empire, not knowing he'd sold pieces of it to devils. About the sister who trusted a smile over evidence. No, I said. Because that version of me could be broken. This one bends, but she doesn't shatter. He smiled. Then he looked away. And I realized. He didn't just admire me. He believed in me. As the night wore on, guests trickled out. The lights dimmed. The music slowed. And I stood alone by the glass wall, overlooking the city. The empire they thought I'd let go? I hadn't let it go. I'd redefined it. And this time, no one would take it from me. The end.